I can see quite a few people joining now. Hello, welcome to those that are dialing in. Just going to give us another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get started. The numbers are creeping up now. Hello to the new joiners. I'm going to give us just another few moments, and then we're going to start talking about shaping the future with data, AI, and customer centricity. Right. I can see we've got a lot of people with us now, so I think it's time to get started. Welcome again. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes setting the scene for today's talk. So first of all, hello. I'm Alex. I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Susanna, who's going to be leading today's webinar. I'll introduce Susanna in more detail shortly, but before I do that, I want to begin by saying I'm really pleased to be kicking off today's Customer Centricity Month event on behalf of CX Partners and Soprasteria Next. This year, we've designed a fabulous month-long series of events that will take us from understanding the fundamentals all the way through to delivering on the future of customer centricity. So we're on quite the journey in just 4 weeks. This is the second talk in our series, and we have 2 more to come on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. for the next 2 weeks. And for any of you that are a little curious about what the connection is between CX Partners and Soprasteria Next, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. So CX Partners is a research and design specialist that's part of Soprasteria Next UK, and together they form a consultancy that reimagines the organisations and the services that shape the UK today. They design and deliver innovative and effective end-to-end transformation programs for some of the UK's most well-known brands. But back to today's talk, which, as I said earlier, it will be given by Susanna, who's our head of UK data and AI consulting. She's going to be talking to you about how data and artificial intelligence are transforming customer interactions and user experiences. And she's going to talk about how organizations can get ready for the age of AI by leveraging data. So I'm going to hand over to Susanna in just a moment, but before I do, I need to cover off some brief housekeeping bits. So firstly, I just wanted to let you know that this is a one-way webinar, which means that no one can see or hear you. You can, however, ask any questions using the Slido, and there's a button for that at the bottom right of your screen. And you can choose whether you ask your question anonymously or with your name. It's totally up to you. I'm going to pop back at the end of the presentation to ask Susanna your questions. And finally, from a housekeeping point of view, if you'd like to turn on closed captions, you can do. The button for that is in the bottom left corner of the screen. So without any further delay, Susanna, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm so pleased to have you all here. I'm Susanna Matchka. I head up the data and AI consulting practice within Soprasteria Next. And as Alex said, today I'm going to be talking about data, AI, and customer centricity. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about why people and data are key for your organization's AI ambitions. So let's get started. If you're like me, then you'll like to know exactly what we're doing, in what order, and what we're going to talk about today. So we're looking at first an introduction to understand the topic area and the landscape. We'll then be taking a look at what I call the big picture to set the context around AI, data, and customer centricity. Then I'll be moving on to some common challenges that we see many organizations face. And then most importantly, we're looking at how we can overcome those challenges as well. I'll finish with the outcomes and benefits, and then a summary of what's been discussed today. And as Alex mentioned earlier, there'll also be a portion for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please do add them in the Slido throughout the presentation, and that would be fantastic. And we'll try and cover as many as we can at the end of the presentation. My intention for the session, the purpose of it, is that you leave today feeling like you've got a pragmatic view of AI, that you can know how to explore the ways to remove blockers to progress with AI, and understand the important role that data has to play within this as well. So hopefully by the end of the session, you feel more informed about AI, you feel more confident in how you can maybe bring that into your organization, and you know the common challenges to look out for as well. So I thought I'd start with a little bit about me so that you can get to know me better. For 2020, 32, NA, 65, 19. So hopefully from that, you know all the basic things about me and you feel like maybe you know me a little bit more, but maybe you need a bit more information actually. So here's the rest of it. Now you know everything there is to know about me, right? Maybe not quite, because data without context, without understanding the whole story, without understanding the questions that have been asked to get that data, makes no sense at all. But for instance, if I told you that I joined Soprasteria in 2020, that I live at number 19, that I have one dog and one cat, then maybe these numbers start to make a little bit more sense and you would understand the meaning behind them a little bit more, and they'd be more important to you and have some value. And I know this is a sort of flippant exercise, but really what I'm trying to say is that data within organizations is much the same. If you don't know where it's come from, why you've got it, what the purpose of it is, what questions were asked to generate it, then that data has no value to you. You need to have a deeper understanding than just the factual figures in order to really understand what the data is trying to tell you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about nurturing data and why that's important. And I thought maybe it would be best to start with a little story on this one as well. So in the summer, I decided that I wanted to start gardening, which will be a huge shock to anyone who knows me and works with me. I'm not normally the outdoorsy type. What I actually wanted was flowers in the garden. I wanted vegetables that I'd grown myself that we could eat for dinner. I wasn't really interested in the act of gardening as such. I have no previous experience, I have no knowledge, I have no skills in this area. Nothing to support me in this endeavor, but I knew what I wanted and I set out with a purpose on this one. So I bought the seeds of the vegetables and the flowers that I wanted. I bought some little pots to put them in and some soil. I made a little hole in the soil, planted the seed, watered them, and then I left them to it and assumed that everything would be fine. I thought that that was my part done. And now the flowers would blossom, the tomatoes would flourish, and nature would take care of everything else for me. I do live in the northeast of England after all. I thought it'll rain plenty and I won't really have to do anything much here. Safe to say, a couple of weeks, a couple of months later, nothing had really happened. There's a few sorry looking plants in the garden. Really, what I forgot was that these things take work. You can't just throw seeds in the ground and hope for the best without putting in any effort, without nurturing them, without setting out with a proper plan and a purpose behind it. And I tell you this today because I think data is much the same. We can't just throw it into a database or a data warehouse or a data lake, wherever you're putting it, without taking the time to nurture it, to understand it, and to help give it the most optimal conditions that your organization needs to get the best out of that data. Safe to say, I'm done with gardening now. I'm sticking with data and AI. But ultimately, what's important is that data is generated by humans. It is a reflection of humans' wants, needs, their behaviors whenever they make a purchase, whenever they interact with a product, whenever they interact with a system, or the humans within your organization, your staff who are doing their day-to-day roles. All data is a reflection of human actions at the end of the day. And there is no AI without data. For most organizations, the challenge of legacy and disparate and poor quality data needs to be addressed before they can hope to start looking at AI projects and achieve the return on investment that they're looking for. So really, what I'm talking about here is that the groundwork needs to be put in upfront in order to lead to better chances of success for your AI project. Quite alarmingly, I would say, research has shown that an estimated 80% of all AI projects fail. And we'll be taking a look at why that might be in the next part of this presentation. So why do the 80% of projects fail? I have called this one POC paralysis, and hopefully that'll become evident as to why. But what I want to do here is explore some common AI challenges. In no particular order, I think they're all equally important. So first of all, not starting with users. So not taking the time to understand your users, their pain points, their requirements. If you don't do that, you lack the purpose behind the initiative that you're trying to put in place. And there's no value behind the work that you're trying to do if you don't understand your users and what they do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's your internal users or your external users or both. This needs to be understood before we start trying to implement any sort of AI initiatives. Miscommunication and misunderstanding. Stakeholders often misunderstand or miscommunicate what problem needs to be solved with AI. This can be due to a lack of understanding of the technology itself, of its capabilities, what it needs in order to be successful, or what outputs and difference you can expect from that technology. Or it can come from a misunderstanding of the problem itself. If the problem isn't able to be articulated confidently and communicated throughout the business, it's likely that there's going to be some miscommunications throughout the way. And if that isn't tested continuously, then you can end up quite far from where you started in terms of that communicating of the problem. Next, we have ignoring the data. So as I've said previously, there is no AI without data, and poor data will lead to poor quality AI. You've probably heard the saying, rubbish in, rubbish out. That definitely applies here. And similarly, many AI projects fail because the organization lacks the necessary data to adequately train an effective AI model. So any data that you're putting into an AI system needs to be standardized, it needs to be high quality, it needs to be complete, and it needs to be understood. It also needs to be in a format that you can use that is suitable. Training AI models takes a vast amount of data. Essentially, we tell it the answer at first to train it and to optimize it, and then we move on to letting it predict the answer when we do not know what the outcome will be. This needs a vast amount of data in order to learn to predict, build the relationships, and fine-tune the algorithms. If we do not have the volume of data available or the volume of high quality data available, then this is likely to not be a very effective model and probably won't predict to the level of accuracy that you're looking for within your organization. Next, we have overlooking the fundamentals. So adequate infrastructure is required in order to implement any sort of AI system. This increases the likelihood of project failure if this hasn't been accounted for. So looking at things like your technology stack that you're using, the support that's available for these, the cloud and how you use that within your organization, any sort of security policies, access, governance that's set around that as well. But thinking not only about technology infrastructure, but about the culture, change, and learning as well. So the infrastructure that sits around the people within your organization. We need to make sure that they feel confident in using any new tools that are brought in, that they feel that they know the purpose of it, that they see a value in it, and that they want to use it ultimately. So it's very important not to think of this as a technology only implementation, but to look at it across the business and consider the culture change and learning side of things as well. And then we have what I'm calling magpie syndrome, which we see quite often in a few clients, and that is purchasing the latest and greatest in technology, being told by salespeople that something is going to solve all their problems. It's going to be, the most wonderful thing they've ever brought into the business. But this without a use case is like trying to retrofit something in. So you buy a technology and then you look for a problem to solve. And quite often, it's not the best thing for that problem. It doesn't fit with your organization, but it sounded good and it sounded exciting and you've spent money on it now. So you have to find a way to make it work. Instead, start up front with the use case from understanding your users and use that to define your problem and then find the technology that is the best fit for your problem, not the other way around. It might not always be the most exciting thing, but it will ensure that you get a better return on investment for what you're doing. And then finally, proof of concept, POC paralysis. This is something we hear all the time, and that is getting stuck in a POC or a pilot phase because no business value or use case was defined up front, and there's no specific problem being solved by this AI implementation. So we build something because it sounds cool or because someone else we've heard of is doing it and it sounds like it might be a good idea. But without doing this spade work up front, without defining the use case and the problem and how it's going to fit into the organization, it's likely to just forever be stuck in that pilot phase where, yes, it works, but what are we going to do with it? How are we going to scale it within the business? Who's going to use it? And a lack of ownership here can also contribute. So if no one is owning the solution, if nobody's responsible for the outcomes or responsible for the change management, the user interactions that sit around it, then nobody's going to push it forward and it's probably not going to go anywhere. So what we need to do is look at the whole picture. This is how I think we can combat the challenges. We need to take a more holistic view of AI implementation. Data is a reflection of user needs and behaviors, and users generate the data. AI is dependent on good quality and trustworthy data in order to be useful, but the AI also needs to serve users, and the users need to see a purpose and a use in the AI. If we forget one of these things or don't give it enough attention in comparison to the others, then the triangle will fall apart and the project will most likely not be as successful as it could have been. So this is what I'm calling the AI triangle to make sure that your AI projects are supported. I'm going to have a look at each of these now in turn. So starting first with data, which is the fundamentals and the foundation behind everything. These are some of the common data challenges that I come across when working with clients. So I've worked with clients from different industries over the years, different sectors, all at different points of maturity, but the challenges that we see are generally quite similar across the board. Maybe some of these resonate with you. If they do, then you're definitely not alone in that. And really, the reality is that unless you're a digital first, brand new business that was created in the past couple of years, you likely do have some legacy technology to contend with. And the challenges that come with legacy technology are things like not being able to access the data in a way that you'd like to, or in a format that you'd like to, or having years and years of data where you don't particularly know the quality of it or how trustworthy it is. And all of these things bring their own challenges that need to be contended with as well. But they're all things that can be overcome. For many, data quality is the limiting factor for future development. So this is something that needs to have a good amount of attention given to it as well. So just to pull out a few of the other things that we see in terms of challenges, things like data governance and security can feel quite scary and quite overwhelming, I think, for a lot of people. Nobody wants to end up on the front page of the newspaper because they've done something that they shouldn't have with a customer data or something along those lines. But really being confident in your data governance and security, making sure that it's communicated well throughout the organization, that you have the policies and the regulation and the ethical boundaries in place goes a long way to giving you the confidence that you need in order to move forwards, to be innovative and to develop and move into things like AI. We also see things around an unclear data strategy. So as an organization, we know that we have data, we know that there is value in the data, but we don't really know more than that, what we want to do with it, how it feeds into our wider organizational strategy. Don't make the mistake of viewing data as a technology only problem. Data can support your entire organization, help you to better meet your strategic goals, deliver value across the board, if you view it as something that comes out further than just a technology. So really taking the time to set that data strategy up front, to do the visioning, where you'd like to be, how you want data to serve the organization will pay off in the future in the long term. Something else that we see a lot of is data silos, and this is very common with legacy estates. So data is difficult to get out of systems and it's not interconnected. So you might have a accounting software and you might have a project management software and you can't report across both of those two things together. You can report on one and you can report on the other, but those reports don't cross over. So there's no whole view of what you're doing. There's not a holistic picture. And this can really restrict growth as well. This is our end-to-end view of a data journey, and this encapsulates all the essentials for using data well within your organization. This is something that we've developed within Software Stereo Next, and I find this framing works really well. It gets people thinking about where they are in their journey and where they'd like to be, and if they've missed any steps out along the way in their journey as well. So we start with the mission and vision and setting that high level view of what we want to do and where we'd like to be in the future. And then moving on to things like a data discovery, which really helps you to understand your current landscape and the state of things at the moment. And that means that you can gain a gap analysis from where you are currently to where you want to be in the future with that vision, and then put together a plan that can be put in place that people can take action on in order to move you closer to that future vision of where you want to be. But without understanding where you are at the minute, it's very difficult to get prioritized activities and understand how to get started, really, and it can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes. The goal of this first stage is to have a business case that you can move forwards with. And then moving into the next stage, what we call the enable phase, you'll see the line splits in two. And they're both equally as important, but the top is really about the more technical side of things, data standards and data models, processes, procedures, data engineering, that side of things, of really getting the data where you need it to be and understanding it and having it organized. And then the bottom is more a people-focused side of things. So things like your change strategy, your organizational structure, team skills, data literacy, which means that you can ensure that people feel confident in using data and they know the purpose of it within your organization. The outcome of this phase is that we have a target operating model that's been achieved. And then the next phase, Elevate, is starting to make use of that data. So checking the quality and the cleansing and having a robust data management process in place. And then data visualization, which is things like Power BI, Tableau, whatever else you might use for your reporting, so that you can start to get some insights and make some data-driven decisions from the data that you have within your organization. And then moving forward is probably the exciting part where everyone wants to be, which is things like artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, insight-driven decision making. And what's really key here is the benefits and value measurement. So upfront, you'll see we have a section for defining outcomes and benefits. And then towards the end, we have the section where that's measured. So this really proves the business case that you set out with and makes sure that the value of the work that's been done is measured, is recorded, and is known. And then that allows you to reflect on whether the project was a success. Maybe there needs to be changes made for the next time you run it. Maybe you never want to do it again. But that helps you to have some sort of tangible, quantifiable measure in that. And this isn't a once and done process. So it does have a start and an end in the mission and the ongoing data harnessing, but essentially this is something that needs to be iterated on constantly. So ongoing data harnessing is something that can always be improved, continual improvement of the approach to data within an organization and testing where we can make changes, where we can make improvements, perhaps look at bringing in new data sources or external data sources as well to enrich what's already there. So then moving on to the users section of the triangle and understanding users. So making sure that your AI implementation has purpose, and users are really key to that. So a couple of questions to think about that might help to better understand where your users are coming from and what they might want to see. So who are your users? It sounds like it could be a straightforward question, but if you think about it, maybe it's not as easy as what you first thought. Like, yes, your users could be your clients, your customers, but they could also be internal users. They could be external users who you're sharing information with. And to nail that down and gain agreement on who those users are really goes a long way to setting the foundations that you can move forward from. If everyone knows who's been discussed when you're talking about users, it means that there's a common language that everyone can move forwards with and prevents any sort of miscommunication. And then what does their experience look like? And each group of users will have a different experience, but what does their experience look like? If that's internal users, then what does their job look like on a day-to-day basis? What are their key activities that they need to do? What expectations are on them? What is their motivations? Why are they doing the activities that they're doing? And this feeds into what are their wants and needs. So you might think that your users want an easier way of filling in a certain system, but if you speak to them, they might think, actually, that's fine. What's really bad is when we have to pull this report. And you only find that out by speaking to your users. And then this needs to be tied into as well. What does your organization need? So it needs to feed up into what the organization's overall goals are and how we can help move towards the strategic outcomes that you've set for your business or your client's business. And does the data support these goals? Because sometimes the data is generated and we accept that that's the data that we have and that's what we'll just have to deal with. But is there more data that you can bring in? Is there data that you're not using at the minute? Can you add in something to capture additional data that will better support your goals? Because the data should be answering the business questions that you have. You shouldn't be tailoring the business questions because of the data that's available. Don't let the data be a limiting factor here. So to bring to life this, I thought it would be useful to share some real use cases from clients that we've worked with where we've developed and deployed AI solutions. So things like how can we prevent as many applicants as possible from dropping out of the recruitment process? Recruitment processes can be extremely time consuming and expensive. And what you don't want is halfway through or 3/4 of the way through that people that you thought were great candidates to drop out of the process for things that could have been prevented. So it might be like things like poor scheduling, poor communication, having to go to in-person assessment centres that aren't easy for them to get to, all sorts of different factors. So how can we prevent that? And how can we implement an AI system that helps to shine the light on the relationships behind the data that feeds into that? How can we retain our skilled staff? Most organizations spend a great deal of time and money training up their staff to be who they need them to be in order to do the best job and help them to meet their goals. And how can we encourage people to stay and make positive interventions? How do we understand what data needs to be investigated in order to do that? And then how can we be proactive instead of reactive to industry demands? So using data, we're not just pulling reports from the previous month, we're looking at what does that mean for the future instead. So how do we use the data that we've got in order to make future predictions and therefore organize the business and organize people in a way that maybe serves that better and can react more quickly to the market. And then final side of the triangle, the AI side. So what I want to do here is to talk through something that we've developed at Software Stereo Next, which is our readiness for AI assessment, our AI readiness assessment. So our approach is looking at lots of different pillars across the board. So we have our AI readiness pillars, and that covers strategy, governance and ethics, infrastructure, data, expertise, and culture. So it crosses the entire business. And lots of organizations are keen to adopt artificial intelligence, but they lack clarity on what this means for them and how ready they are to adopt it. So our goal with this is to give an easy way of assessing the current state of the business and how ready they are across these different pillars for introducing AI so that they can make positive interventions in order to improve in areas that they think will help to make a difference to their AI readiness. It's challenging to assess your infrastructure, data quality, talent, culture from the inside, which is why sometimes it helps to have an external perspective on that as well. Because without a clear understanding of readiness, there's a risk of encountering roadblocks, inefficiencies, and leading towards that 80% of AI project implementation failures. There's also something to consider around that if your organization isn't using AI, it's quite likely nowadays that your employees might be. Things like ChatGPT or similar. It's better to get in front of this and set the policies and the rules around how you want people to use or not use it, rather than developing a shadow IT, which can be really hard to manage once it gets going. So Our approach to AI readiness starts with, as we said, users are crucial to everything that we do here. So understanding your organization's short and long-term goals and current challenges and expectations regarding AI adoption, which means that the assessment can be tailored to specific needs and priorities. And then moving into stakeholder interviews, so spending time with the people who do roles within the organization at different levels, different perspectives, and that helps to identify the readiness for AI adoption, any existing barriers, any pain points that need to be addressed, the level of support that people might need, and their commitment towards initiatives as well, how willing they are to adapt to any changes and what support they might need there as well. And if that's the top-down people-first approach, then there's also a bottom-up data collection and analysis approach. So this is understanding strategy, governance, ethics, but also evaluating existing IT infrastructure for compatibility, for scalability, assessing data quality, data standards, the completeness and the reliability of data, and evaluating the skills that exist within the business as well. We then have a phase of benchmarking and best practice review. So this looks to industry and to peer organizations to help to set the benchmarks and contextualize the assessment and find areas where improvements can lead to competitive advantages. The readiness assessment itself uses the findings from all of these analysis and benchmarking and uses that against the 6 pillars that we described in the previous slide. And this helps to form the basis for developing actionable recommendations and helping to prioritize initiatives as well. And then finally, we have a roadmap development. So it's no good really knowing where you are and knowing your levels of readiness without knowing how you can then improve and how you can move forward from that. So really this sets out to give actionable steps, sensible timelines for your organization, key performance indicators so that you can track progress, and recommendations for identifying weaknesses and how you would like to improve these as well. So an example assessment, very simply something along these lines where we have levels of unprepared, somewhat prepared, or prepared against each of the 6 pillars. And this report gives something that's really easy to communicate and share across the business as well. And as I discussed earlier, it helps to move this from being a technology problem, from data and AI, from being seen as something that sits in technology only, to something that moves out wider within the business. And communicating the benefits of what to do really helps to get that message out across the business as well. Clarity is definitely key here. And then we have the outputs and the outcomes of this. So the outputs are things like an identification of strengths across areas needing improvement across those 6 pillars, and a customized roadmap for AI implementation and adoption tailored to address specific challenges and maximize value. And then the outcomes is where it really makes a difference, I think. So that's clear alignment between your AI and your organizational strategies, supported by a clear and well-communicated vision for your organization to rally behind. And it's something that is personalized, prioritized, and a defined route to leveraging AI technologies that maximize value creation in a way that is ethical and compliant, and enhance decision-making capabilities regarding AI investments and initiatives. It's a lot easier to make decisions when you have the guidelines and the criteria and the weighting set out. So the outcomes and benefits of the approach that I've talked through today and why this approach makes a difference. So thinking back to the POC paralysis, what we have here is hopefully what I believe to be the antidote to getting out of that. So it starts with users. It starts with understanding your users, giving time to understand their journey and their pain points and their requirements. And this helps you to have a purpose and a value to your AI implementation because you know the problem that you want to solve. Clear communication, so taking the time to understand and define the problem statement and the use cases. And this is something that should be easily communicated across the business. We're moving AI and data out of being a technology only problem into the rest of the business. And the only way that we can do this is through attaching a value and an outcome and something that everyone's going to be interested in through clear communication. It prioritizes good data. Data is what makes or breaks AI at the end of the day. There is no AI without data. Poor data will lead to poor AI. Understanding your data and taking the time to ensure that it's high quality, that it's complete, it's standardized, and it's understood, It might not be the most important, exciting thing of what you can do, but it is one of the most important things that you can do. It's set in fundamentals. So understand the limits of your infrastructure and the change that is required to manage data and deploy AI models. And this is not only from a technology perspective, but from a people, culture, change, and learning perspective as well. So is your organization set up to help people to come on that change journey with you? Do they feel supported and do they feel adequately trained? It is inspired by problem solving. So define the problem that you are solving and the value of solving it, and measure the benefit of doing so throughout so that you can see if you're on track to get to where you need to be. And proof of concept with a purpose. This is the opposite of proof of concept paralysis. So assign ownership, define the business value, and define the outcomes of the AI deployment. The purpose of AI is to make lives easier. So make sure that you know the problem that you are solving. Just to recap on what I've talked through today, from a data perspective, take the time to understand your data and nurture it. Data will limit what you can achieve in the future, so put the time in now to make sure that your data is high quality and that it will support you in the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. It might not be exciting, but it is extremely valuable to take the time on your data. Users generate the data and they use data to make their jobs better. AI needs to serve them, or it will stay in proof of concept paralysis with little to no return on investment and most likely be one of those 80% of use cases that fail. AI needs to solve a business problem and it needs to fit within the culture of your business. The possibilities of AI are endless, but they are not all sensible or useful. Find out what your users need and want to make their lives better and to make them better at their jobs. Don't ignore the culture and change elements required to implement AI and the new processes that would be associated with this as well. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. If you take one thing away from this, I hope that you remember not just that I'm a bad gardener, but also the AI triangle. I think it will really help you to move forwards with your AI journey. Over to you, Alex, for some Q&A.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Susanna. That was fantastic. It was particularly great to be reminded that AI implementation isn't just a technology challenge, you know, how it needs to be considered in the context of deeply understanding users in order for it to be successful. I'm sure we all want to avoid the pitfalls of that magpie syndrome. I've not heard of that, but that's a really interesting way of looking at that problem. Because it is really easy, isn't it, to forget that data is generated by humans. You know, that connection is sometimes, you know, that connection to real people is sometimes lost because we often engage with data in quite a functional way, perhaps in a spreadsheet or something similar. So yes, it's been really valuable to hear your expert view on how to approach AI as a business challenge and then get the best results from any AI and data project, plus some insight into your gardening hobby as well. That's, you know, that was a bonus. So thank you very much, Susanna. Yes, let's go to questions now. So I can see some great ones appearing in the Slido already. So thank you to those of you who've shared. If you haven't added yours yet, but you do have a question for Susanna, please don't hold back. You can do it either anonymously or with your name, whatever you're most comfortable with, via the Slido button at the bottom right of the screen. We'd love to hear from as many of you as possible. So yeah, please go ahead and add any questions you have. I can see some people have had to drop off early, and David has asked for the slides. So just on that, we will be sharing the recording with everyone afterwards. So you will all have access to Susanna's brilliant content that way. So rest assured, you'll get a copy of this after we've finished. But let's kick off with some questions then. So Susanna, let's start with this one. What is the one thing an organization can do to make better use of their data?
It's I mean the possibilities are endless really, and there's lots of different activities that can be undertaken. But for me, one of my favorite things is the common data model, which I think makes just the biggest difference to organizations. So that is when we look to bring together core applications within a business when we bring their data into one place, and that is building the linkages between different systems so that we can better understand the data. And it prevents what I discussed in the presentation of reporting on one system at a time, and helps you move towards a place where you can report across multiple systems. So it really starts with defining what your core applications are, what we call like a core hierarchy within your organization, what matters for the questions that you're trying to answer, pulling the data out of all of those systems, putting it into a data lake or a data warehouse, and then looking at the data model that makes the most sense to build as part of that. So how do you link the different data together? What are your commonalities, your linking factors between them? Looking at ways that they duplicate as well. So in some systems, you might have first name down as first name, and another system might be name one, and looking for those similarities and how you can start to join that data together and build out the data model, which then allows you to report across multiple systems as opposed to just looking at one at a time. And that bringing together of the data, I think, is one of the most valuable things that you can do with your data, because so many times we hear problems that clients have with poor quality reporting or not getting the answers that they need from reporting. And I think this really helps to take steps towards a better view of data within an organization.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susanna. Hopefully that answers your question, whoever popped that one in the chat. I have another one for you. So this is from Yumiko. Apologies if I've not pronounced your name right, but they ask, what are some examples of best ways to collect data from users?
It depends really on your organization and how you interact with your users. If you're gathering it more on the back end side of things, so every time they interact with a website or an application, are you collecting that data that they're putting in? Or is it more you're asking them to enter data into a front end like a website, or you're speaking to them on the phone and recording it there? If you want high quality data, you need to set up front what the standards of that will be. So if you give say an open text box on a website and the question is, how old are you? People could type in words, they could put letters, they could put decimal points, they could put fractions if they really wanted to. But what are you looking for? You know, do you want it in a text format? Do you want it in a number format? So understanding what you want from the data, and then you can set restrictions as well. So you can set restrictions in that text box to things like drop down menus so that you can be sure that you get the values that you're looking for. Because when you give users free rein to enter whatever they want, they will enter whatever they want. So the most that you can control helps to improve the quality of that data. And then think about, you know, the way that they interact with your systems. At what points are you gathering information, and can you add in anything else that'll give you data that you don't previously know? So thinking about systems that process data, sometimes you know when it goes in, and you know the process that it goes through and the outputs at each stage, and you know when it's finished, but you maybe don't know the timings between different parts of that process. So can you add in some extra analytical tools and logs to make sure that you get different data that you need? So hopefully that answers the question, but I really would say it depends on how you interact with users to start with.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susanna. Z has asked a question. Can you recommend some AI tools or apps that support us to improve our customer experience? They've said that they are a Shopify page builder app. Any advice there, Susanna?
To reiterate what I've said throughout the presentation, I suppose, is take the time to understand your users and what they want. Don't set out looking for the technology first. There's endless AI technology out there at the minute. But if you don't know the problem that you're trying to solve, you won't be able to select the best tools for your customers and also for your own organization. It needs to be something that you can support or that you can build skills in, because buying this technology that nobody knows how to use or knows how to support or integrate with the rest of your business could be a huge problem and a huge financial cost as well. So something that is supported or that you can build skills in, but also something that helps your users, that gets you the information that you need from your users. So start with the problem and then define your criteria, what's important to you, what's important to your business, and then start to look at technologies. And when you do that, you can do things like look at who else uses them, look at recommendations, But really, my advice would be start with the problem and then the technology comes last.
Great advice, Susanna. Hopefully that's helpful for you, Z. Thank you for asking your question. Let's see what next question. The next question, so this is coming from an anonymous person, which is absolutely fine, but they ask, what is the most common mistake that you see organizations make with regards to AI?
I think it's probably running out and buying technology out of fear more than anything. So they think everyone else is doing it. All of our competitors are already doing AI really successfully. Feeling the pressure and making decisions out of fear instead of taking the time to understand the problem that they're trying to solve, the outcomes that they'd like to get out of it, the business case surrounding it, and then select the best tool for them. And AI isn't always off the shelf tools. It's not just ChatGPT. There's lots of different things you can build AI, open source in Python, in R, in whatever you want to do. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy a tool that's set. You can build something that works for you. So take the time, do the work up front, get your data in a good place, understand your problem, and then select the technology afterwards. I sound like a broken record at this point, but hopefully I'm getting the point across.
No, I mean, it's a really important point, isn't it? And it's a really common challenge. And actually, John here asks a question that is sort of taking that challenge, taking that advice you're giving, but kind of putting it on its head a little bit. He says, so applying systematic or design thinking makes perfect sense when addressing sort of tech advancements within companies. However, that mentality of tech-led or solution-first, he says it's almost unbreakable.
Mm.
So any tips on how to break down the barriers, I guess, from a people and a culture point of view, as well as from a best practice implementation point of view?
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult to break a culture within an organization, ways of working that have been there for years. We've always done things this way. Don't break it. It works. Don't touch it, sort of thing. It can be very difficult. I think my advice for this one is to start small. When you have a lot of eyes on a project within an organization and you're trying to do something different, there's a lot of pressure on you, I think, to not fail. But of course, it's completely fine to fail fast, to iterate, to improve. So if you start small with a small problem that you're trying to solve, but make sure that you are involving the key stakeholders within the business and maybe look a bit wider than what you normally would. But who do you need to convince? Who's important to get on board? And make sure that they are part of the process and that you're communicating with them throughout, that you measure the benefits up front, define what your outcomes are going to be, and then track your progress against them as well. It's difficult to argue with the facts and the figures at the end if you have them to share, more than just sentiment and feeling and things like that. So if you can make it as measurable as possible and make people feel included in the process. People generally like things that make their lives easier, make them better at their job. So if you can communicate how it does this, I think that's a lot easier. And at the same time, the pitfalls of going with, solution first, technology first. It might have worked when there wasn't as much technology options to choose from, but now, the options are endless and you can really box yourself into a corner if you approach things in that way. It's the sort of cultural change that really takes a lot of time, but I think if you start small and try to scale it, it's a good way of trying to turn the tide on that one.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's not something that can be solved overnight, but I suppose, like you say, it's those little steps, and it's about being inclusive and being collaborative, and bringing people on that journey, because we are kind of at the beginning of a journey really here with a lot of the AI implementation. So I think we've got one final question here from the audience. Chris asks, do you have any tips on practical steps that product owners can take to reduce the carbon footprint of their data besides auditing? Any thoughts on that one, Susanna?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think sustainability is key for all organizations at the minute. It's something that we're all thinking about. I think sometimes it's just about communication and awareness. Everyone nowadays likes to play with ChatGPT and ask it questions and things, but maybe some people aren't aware of the computing power behind it and how much energy, how much water it uses to do these processes. And I've heard it described as using a Ferrari to deliver a pizza. It's overkill for a lot of things. So I think start with awareness. I think a lot of the time people just aren't aware of the impact that it's having. If you can equate that into other things as well. I know previously we worked with a client a long time ago now, but to get them to stop using as much paper. And paper's one thing, but if you can equate that into, say, for instance, trees, I think it's a lot more, people can picture it and it feels a lot more tangible if you can communicate that in a way that people can visualize and it feels a lot more real. So yeah, I think awareness is probably the first step on those.
Great. Thank you, Susanna. Yes, it's, again, baby steps in the right direction, positive, continuous improvement, incremental change, and yeah, measuring and pivoting, because we won't all get it all right all the time. So no, that's really sound advice. Thank you very much. I've just seen that Z has posted asking about the recording and the slides for attendants who registered for the event. So yes, we will be sharing the recording with everyone afterwards. So you will get access to all of Susanna's brilliant insight and content that way. So that will be heading over shortly after we finish the webinar. So I can't see any more questions in the thank you, Z. I can't see any more questions in the chat. We have a few more minutes, so maybe I'm going to be a bit selfish, Susanna. I've got a question. I'm going to ask one final question. Where's the best place to start for if an organization wants to explore AI? Like you said during your talk, it's something that's on most people's minds. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue, but it feels, for me, it's like, gosh, that's a really big thing to then try and make a dent in. Where's the best place to start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the best place to start is spend time with your users, with the people who are doing day-to-day roles within your organization, the people who are responsible for data input or generating reports, and spend a day with them and ask them what activities they do and why, and what parts of the process they think work well, what parts of the process they hate doing and that they dread every day. And it's amazing what comes to the surface. You'll find that there's people who spend, half a day a week generating a report and they don't know why. They send it to someone and it feels like it goes down a black hole. I'm sure we've all been there at some point. You generate a report, you send it on, and someone goes, okay, that one's red, that one's green, no action's taken, and then you do the same again next month. So find out where these inefficiencies are within your organization or within your client organization. Find out the bits that really annoy people that would make their lives easier if they didn't have to do it. And that's a great place to start looking at what AI could do for you in those areas. It's where you're likely to get the most return on investment, where you're likely to get the most buy-in from users. So start there, define the problem, understand the benefits of improving it, define your outcomes and what you're going to measure, and then move forwards into the proof of concept phase that you will then hopefully get out of because you have to find the problem up front. So yeah, I think that's where I would say to start.
Brilliant. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I can imagine actually that process is a really interesting, possibly cathartic activity. So it's doubly beneficial all round. Fantastic. Okay, then. Well, so I think that is about all we have time for today. So all that's left for me to do is thank everyone again for coming along. Thank you for all of your questions, all of your thoughts, and a big thank you to Susanna for the brilliant talk. It was really insightful, really inspiring. Hopefully everyone has learned something new today. I know I have. As I've mentioned a couple of times, we will be sharing a recording with everyone very soon, so look out for that in your inboxes. And also, we'd love to hear your feedback on the session today. So let us know what you found most useful, anything else that you want to share with us. Do get in touch. But it's been an absolute delight. Thanks again, everyone. And we'll wrap up there. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you.